In the year 2325, humanity had spread across the stars. With advanced technology and a thirst for exploration, Earth's descendants had established colonies on over 30 different worlds. But while humans had thrived, they had never fully escaped the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council, a vast and ancient coalition of alien species that governed the galaxy. The Council, in its unyielding pursuit of order and peace, had set strict guidelines for every sentient race. Their laws were absolute, their decisions final. Most species, eager to avoid conflict, adhered to these regulations. But humanity, ever defiant and independent, had always been different. They didn't bow to authority easily, and they had a habit of questioning the status quo. For years, humanity had skirted the Council's boundaries. The Council had warned, scolded, and tried to impose harsher restrictions, but each time, the human spirit pushed back. Their ability to adapt, to innovate, and to stand their ground was unmatched by any of the other galactic species. What the Council saw as rebellion, humanity viewed as freedom. The turning point came when the United Earth government, led by President Julian Garrick, defied a direct order from the Galactic Council. The order was simple: disband their latest exploration initiative, a fleet of advanced ships designed to venture into the unknown reaches of the galaxy. But humans, armed with their new experimental drive technology, had other plans. As the Council's demands were broadcast across the galaxy, the fleet of human ships prepared for their launch from the planet Archon, a bustling hub of human activity. The ships were sleek, powerful, and the result of decades of research. Unlike other species, humanity had a knack for technology that combined elegance with raw power, and their ships reflected that duality. President Garrick knew the consequences of defying the Galactic Council would be severe. Rumors swirled about the Council's readiness to act, and a shadow of fear hung over the human colonies. But Garrick, standing before the Assembly of Earth, was resolute. "We will not bow to anyone who seeks to limit our destiny. Our future lies among the stars, and we will chart our own course, regardless of what the Council says," Garrick declared. As the human fleet powered up, preparing to leave Archon's atmosphere, a powerful signal pulsed from the Galactic Council's headquarters on the capital planet, Lorien. It was a message to humanity, warning them of the dire consequences of their defiance. The Council had spoken. But humanity's response was swift. Across every major human colony, leaders from various sectors and governments released statements of support. The decision had already been made. Earth would stand alone, and if the Council sought to stop them, they would face the wrath of the most determined species in the galaxy. On Archon, Garrick stood in the command center of the flagship Vanguard, watching as the fleet's ships began to ascend into the stars. The comms officer turned to him, her face a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Mr. President, the Council is threatening sanctions, military action, and even the complete blockade of our colonies," she reported. Garrick nodded gravely, but his resolve remained unshaken. "They've underestimated us," he said. "They don't know what we're capable of." As the last human ship cleared the atmosphere, a ripple of uncertainty spread throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council had never been challenged like this before, and the other species watched in silent curiosity. Would humanity be crushed under the weight of the Council's power? Or would they find a way to carve their own place among the stars, no matter the cost? The Council's reaction was swift and brutal. A fleet of warships, led by the mighty Zentaur, a towering insectoid race feared across the galaxy, was dispatched to intercept the human fleet. The Council believed that this would be the end of the human challenge, that their defiance would be extinguished before it could spread. But they had underestimated one thing: the fierce, unbreakable will of humankind. The Vanguard and the rest of the fleet entered hyperspace, beginning their journey into the uncharted regions. But as they left the well-known systems, the true nature of their mission became clear. Humanity wasn't just defying the Council's orders. They were preparing to do something far more dangerous. They were preparing to change the galaxy forever. As the human fleet sailed deeper into the unknown, the vastness of space seemed to consume them. The stars grew farther apart, and the familiar gravitational fields of known systems faded behind them. On board the Vanguard, President Garrick stood before a star map, his finger tracing the lines of coordinates they had set into their navigation system. Behind him, Captain Alyssa Cole, the commanding officer of the fleet, watched the data stream across the holographic display. The fleet had entered the uncharted zone, where no human had ventured before. This was no ordinary exploration mission, it was a statement. A bold declaration that humanity would no longer be tethered by the chains of the Galactic Council's regulations. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Council," said Lieutenant Harris, his voice tinged with concern. "They've identified our position." Garrick's jaw tightened. "Let them watch," he said coldly. "We're not turning back." The transmission was brief but blunt, as expected. The Galactic Council's High Magistrate, a cold and calculating being known only as Zyther, appeared on the main screen. His reptilian eyes glowed with an ominous red hue, his voice deep and foreboding. "President Garrick, your actions have not gone unnoticed. You are placing your entire species at risk. The fleet you have sent will be intercepted, and if necessary, destroyed. The consequences for your defiance will be severe." Garrick stood firm, unwavering. "Your threats do not scare us, Zyther. Humanity will not bow to your laws any longer. We choose our path." With that, the transmission ended, and the fleet pressed onward. However, the Council's words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to strike. It wasn't long before the first signs of the Council's retaliation appeared. Suddenly, an alert blared across the fleet. On every ship, red lights flashed, signaling the presence of an incoming fleet. The Vanguard's sensors scanned the vast emptiness ahead, pinpointing the enemy ships. A massive armada, far larger than anything humanity had faced before, emerged from the folds of space. The Council had sent their enforcers, the Zentaur. The Zentaur warships, designed for one purpose, battle, loomed in the distance. Their sleek, insectoid designs resembled colossal mantis creatures, capable of incredible speed and agility in combat. Their weapons were designed to decimate entire fleets, their shields nearly impenetrable. It was clear, the Council had come to make an example of humanity. "All ships, prepare for battle." Captain Cole barked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "This is it. We'll show them what humanity is made of." On the bridge of the Vanguard, President Garrick didn't flinch. The Zentaur might have the numbers, but humanity had something they couldn't understand: resolve. The Vanguard's weapon systems came online, its plasma cannons and missile bays locking into place. The crew moved swiftly, every member knowing the gravity of the situation. This was not just a fight for survival. This was humanity's chance to prove its place in the galaxy. As the two fleets collided, the space around them erupted into chaos. Laser beams and plasma bolts illuminated the void, ships twisting and dodging through the barrage. The Zentaur attacked with relentless precision, their warships tearing through human defenses with ease. But humanity fought back with ingenuity. The Vanguard, using its superior maneuverability, weaved between the Zentaur ships, targeting weak points and striking with pinpoint accuracy. Despite the Zentaur's strength and overwhelming numbers, the human ships fought fiercely, refusing to retreat. The battle raged for hours, each side pushing their limits, but it became clear that the Zentaur had underestimated humanity's tenacity. Then, in a daring move, Captain Cole ordered the fleet to engage the experimental weapon humanity had developed in secret, a subspace disruptor. It was a risky maneuver, one that could potentially cripple the fleet but also create an opening to defeat the Zentaur. With the press of a button, the Vanguard unleashed the weapon. A pulse of energy rippled through the space around them, distorting the fabric of reality itself. The Zentaur ships, caught off guard, faltered in their attacks as their systems scrambled. Shields flickered, weapons systems malfunctioned, and for a brief moment, the Zentaur were thrown into disarray. "Now! Attack!" Captain Cole shouted. The human fleet seized the opportunity, unleashing a volley of missiles and concentrated laser fire. Zentaur warships exploded in brilliant bursts of light, their hulking forms ripped apart by human precision. Though the Zentaur had been momentarily disrupted, they weren't beaten. A counterattack soon followed, but humanity had gained a crucial advantage. As the battle continued, it became clear to Garrick and the crew. The battle with the Zentaur had ended in a hard-won victory for humanity, but the cost was high. The Vanguard had taken significant damage, and several other ships in the fleet were heavily damaged or destroyed. The human survivors, though battered, stood victorious. Against all odds, they had repelled the first wave of the Galactic Council's enforcers. However, the respite was short-lived. The Council, incensed by the human defiance, was already preparing its next move. But for the first time in history, the voices of the human leaders began to unite in a single cause. This war was not only for survival but for the very future of their species. Garrick sat in the war room aboard the Vanguard, surrounded by his senior officers and representatives from various human colonies. His mind was heavy with the knowledge that the Council would not relent. If anything, they would escalate their retaliation. Yet, despite the looming threat, Garrick felt a growing sense of something else: hope. The humans had shown they could fight, but more importantly, they had shown they could endure. The Vanguard's victory, while a small one in the grand scheme of things, had shaken the Council. And across the galaxy, the human colonies were beginning to stir. There was no longer any question, this was a galactic conflict, and humanity was no longer the underdog. "We've sent a message to the Council," said Lieutenant Harris, breaking Garrick's train of thought. "They'll be expecting more force to come our way. But there's something else." Garrick looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Harris hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There's a growing coalition forming among the independent colonies. They're calling it the Free Star Alliance. They're offering us their support." The mention of the Free Star Alliance caught Garrick's attention. It was a coalition of independent systems, species that had always been on the fringes of the Council's rule, beings who had been oppressed, ignored, or exploited by the Council's draconian policies. If humanity could form an alliance with them, they might just have a chance to stand up to the full might of the Galactic Council. "What are they offering us?" Garrick asked, his voice filled with cautious optimism. "Ships, weapons, and supplies. More importantly, they're offering intelligence. They've been fighting the Council's oppression for decades. They know things about the Council's movements, their weaknesses, and the way they operate." Garrick exchanged a glance with Captain Cole, who stood nearby. She nodded. The time for diplomacy was over. This was now a war. "We'll take their help," Garrick said decisively. "But we need to make sure we show them that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. We need to give them a reason to believe in us." Over the next few days, the fleet began to receive reinforcements from the Free Star Alliance. The ships were diverse in design, different species, different technologies, but all united in a common cause. Humanity was no longer alone in their defiance. Across the fleet, the human crews were greeted by their new allies, and there was a palpable sense of solidarity. Yet, despite this newfound hope, President Garrick knew they still had a long way to go. The Council would not take this threat lightly. But the alliances forming in the shadows were not to be ignored. The Council was facing a rebellion unlike any they had ever seen. It wasn't long before the first real test came. A massive Council task force, led by the legendary warlord Xanther, arrived in the outer reaches of human space. Xanther was known for his ruthlessness and efficiency. He had crushed countless uprisings in the galaxy with an iron fist. His fleet was vast, far larger than anything humanity had faced before. But Garrick and his new allies were ready. The Vanguard was no longer the only ship in the fight. Now, they had a full fleet of diverse ships, each one equipped with advanced weapons and tactics honed by years of resisting the Council's tyranny. The Free Star Alliance had shared invaluable intelligence, giving them a fighting chance. As the human and allied fleets gathered in the outer rim, preparing for the inevitable clash, the tension was palpable. Everyone knew this would be the moment that determined the outcome of the war. If humanity and the Free Star Alliance could defeat Xanther's fleet, they would send a message to the Council: they would not be crushed so easily. Garrick stood on the command deck of the Vanguard, looking out at the stars. His heart raced, but his resolve was unwavering. This was the beginning of something far greater than a simple rebellion. This was the dawn of a new era, a galaxy where humanity would no longer be a subjugated species. "We're not just fighting for survival," he said softly to Cole, who stood beside him. "We're fighting for freedom, for every species that's ever been oppressed by the Council." Cole nodded, her eyes fierce. "And we'll win, sir. Because we're human. And we never give up." As the enemy fleet loomed ahead, ready for battle, Garrick's thoughts turned to the future. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. But he knew one thing for certain: the Galactic Council had underestimated humanity's will to fight, and now they would see what happened when humans defied the odds. The first wave of the Council's reinforcements came in fast and hard. Led by Warlord Xanther's flagship, the Ishkar, a massive battlecruiser of nearly unassailable size, the fleet was a menacing sight against the black void of space. Xanther, a creature of the Vrwx species, a towering, armored being, was infamous for his ruthless tactics and insatiable desire for domination. His fleet outnumbered humanity's by at least 3-1, and the Free Star Alliance's forces, though strong, were vastly inexperienced in direct combat. But humanity had something Xanther's fleet could never anticipate: creativity. Unlike the disciplined, methodical forces of the Council, the human ships moved with a sense of unpredictability, a chaos that made their enemies hesitate. On the bridge of the Vanguard, President Garrick stood tall, his eyes narrowed with focus. "This is it," Garrick said, his voice steady, though he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "We don't fight like them. We fight smarter. We make them question what they're up against." Captain Cole nodded from her command seat. "Understood, sir. All ships, brace for impact. We'll hold them off long enough for the Free Star Alliance forces to engage." The two fleets faced off in the vast expanse of the Outer Rim. At the signal, the battle erupted with a thunderous roar of laser fire, plasma blasts, and missile salvos. The human fleet, coordinated with the help of their new allies, split into smaller units, using their agility to outmaneuver the Xantar ships and avoid their devastating attacks. But Xanther was no fool. He quickly adapted, pushing his forces into tight formations, attempting to overwhelm the human ships with sheer firepower. The Vanguard danced across the battlefield, its hull shaking as it dodged incoming fire. Every human ship did its best to avoid the deadly barrages from the Xantar warships, weaving through the chaos like predators darting between the legs of a much larger foe. "Incoming," warned Lieutenant Harris, his hands flying across the console. "A direct hit from a Xantar missile battery on our aft shields." The Vanguard rocked violently as the explosion splintered through space, but the ship's shields held, and the crew, hardened by their previous battles, maintained their composure. Garrick's eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for an opening. "Get us to their flank," he ordered. "We're already there, sir," Captain Cole responded. "We've got their command ships in our sights." The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it closed in on the Xantar fleet. Suddenly, an alarm blared. "Critical damage to port side. Shields are down to 20%, the chief engineer called out over the intercom. "We need to hold them off just a little longer," Garrick muttered, gripping the back of the captain's chair. "Bring the disruptor back online. Now." The Vanguard subspace disruptor, though dangerous and untested in previous battles, was humanity's secret weapon, a device that scrambled enemy ship systems, rendering them temporarily useless. It was a risky move, but the battle was slipping away from them. On the other side of the battlefield, the Free Star Alliance ships, ships of many shapes, sizes, and origins, began to engage the Xantar with relentless fury. They attacked from every direction, using their knowledge of the Council's tactics to exploit every weakness in their formation. The Xantar, despite their overwhelming numbers, were being stretched thin, forced into a battle of attrition that they had not anticipated. As the Vanguard fired its final salvo of missiles, the subspace disruptor pulsed to life once more. A shockwave rippled through the battlefield, scrambling the Xantar ship systems. For a brief moment, the tides shifted. The Xantar's advanced targeting systems faltered, and their communications became garbled. Human and Alliance ships pounced on the opportunity, blasting their enemies apart with deadly precision. But just as victory seemed within reach, the Ishkar emerged from the chaos, its weapons blazing. Xanthar's flagship was a beast, a monster of war that seemed impervious to all but the most concentrated fire. It barreled toward the vanguard with terrifying speed, and Garrick could feel the ship's engines thrumming beneath his feet, preparing to face the inevitable. "We need to take that ship down or we lose the whole battle," Captain Cole shouted over the roar of weapons fire. Garrick's mind raced. The Xanthar's flagship was formidable, but if they could break its forward shields, they might have a chance. He turned to Lieutenant Harris. "Activate the graviton torpedoes," Garrick ordered, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "We need to cripple its core engines. Now." Harris didn't hesitate. The graviton torpedoes were a risky maneuver. They could tear through an enemy ship's structure by disrupting the very gravity fields within, but they were humanity's last chance. The Vanguard unleashed a devastating salvo of graviton torpedoes at the Ishkar, each one hitting with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Ishkar shuddered violently, its massive form shaking as the torpedoes tore into its core. A bright flash of light erupted from the flagship's center, followed by a secondary explosion that rocked the entire battlefield. "Direct hit!" Harris shouted. "We've taken down their core engines." The Ishkar began to list to one side, its once formidable weapons falling silent as the ship's engines sputtered and failed. Xanthar, caught off guard, ordered a retreat, but it was too late. The damage was too extensive. With their flagship in disarray, the remaining Xanthar forces faltered. One by one, they were picked apart by the relentless assault of the human fleet and their new allies. The tide had turned. As the last Xanthar warships were reduced to debris, the battlefield fell eerily silent. The human fleet had won the battle, but the victory came at a high price. Several ships were lost, and many were heavily damaged. But they had succeeded in what many thought impossible. They had stopped the full might of the Galactic Council's first offensive. On the Vanguard, Garrick allowed himself a moment of relief. They had proven that humanity could not only fight back but could also win. The war was far from over, but for the first time, there was hope. The Free Star Alliance had shown their loyalty, and the human fleet had shown that it was more than capable of standing tall against the Council. And as the crew of the Vanguard cheered, Garrick knew that the next step in their fight had already begun. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity, and now, they would pay the price. The victory at the Outer Rim was a monumental triumph for humanity and their new allies, but it was only a single battle in a larger, unrelenting war. The Xanthar had been pushed back, but the Galactic Council's might was far from exhausted. President Garrick knew that they had to act quickly while they still had momentum. The Council's leadership would not tolerate another defeat. They would regroup, rearm, and come back with everything they had. The human fleet, now bolstered by the Free Star Alliance, moved into a new phase of their campaign, infiltration. They could not afford another all-out battle with the Council's forces, especially with the warlord Xanthar still alive, retreating to lick his wounds and rebuild his forces. Instead, they would strike at the heart of the Council itself. The Council's central hub was located on Lorien, a planet shrouded in mystery and security, home to the Council's ruling body and its most powerful leaders. It was a heavily fortified world, surrounded by layers of defense networks, hypersecure space stations, and an impenetrable blockade of warships. To assault Lorien directly would be suicide. But Garrick was not one to back down from impossible odds. "We've got one shot at this," Garrick said in the war room of the Vanguard, his eyes fixed on the star map of the Lorien system. "We need to break through their defenses, hit the heart of the Council, and expose their leadership. We cripple their command structure, and the rest of the galaxy will see them for what they truly are, a paper tiger." Captain Cole was already scanning the star map. "Lorien's defenses are formidable, but we've got the element of surprise. If we take the direct route and avoid their main detection grid, we might be able to slip past unnoticed." "And then what?" Lieutenant Harris asked, his tone doubtful. Even if we get through, their fleet will obliterate us before we can reach the planet's surface. Garrick held up a hand, silencing the room. That's where the Free Star Alliance comes in. We'll use their technology to mask our approach. They've developed cloaking technology that can bypass the Council's sensors. We'll use that to get in close. Cole raised an eyebrow. You want us to get close to Lorien's surface, undetected, and then what? A full assault? Garrick nodded. We'll split the fleet into smaller strike teams. We hit the Council's leadership facilities, take out their key members, and broadcast their downfall to every corner of the galaxy. The Council's authority will collapse, and will inspire other systems to rise up against them. The room fell silent. It was an audacious plan, no, a desperate one. But humanity had learned long ago that survival often required risk. The stakes were higher than ever, and if they failed now, the galaxy would be lost to the Council forever. Within hours, the plan was set into motion. The fleet, cloaked and ready, jumped into the Lorien system under the cover of darkness. The Free Star Alliance's cloaking technology, integrated into the human ships, allowed them to slip through the Council's most advanced defense grids undetected. They were ghosts in the void, approaching the heart of the Council's empire. As they neared the atmosphere of Lorien, the human fleet slowed. The cloaking devices remained active, but they couldn't maintain their invisibility for long. They had to make their move soon. The human ships, led by the Vanguard, broke into their assigned positions, each vessel assigned a target in the heart of Lorien's political and military infrastructure. This is it, Garrick said, his voice firm with determination. We either succeed, or we give everything. For humanity. For the galaxy. The teams descended toward their objectives, slipping through planetary defenses that had been designed to deter the most advanced warships. The Council's security systems, while formidable, had never accounted for a species with humanity's ingenuity. They had underestimated human resourcefulness and their ability to adapt. But just as it seemed they might succeed, an alarm sounded across the fleet. The cloaking systems are being detected. Lieutenant Harris reported. Their countermeasures are triggering. We've been compromised. It was too late to retreat. The Council's defenses, having detected the subtle anomaly in the fabric of space, activated their planetary weapons. Powerful anti-ship cannons began to fire from the surface of Lorien, targeting the human fleet. Engage evasive maneuvers. Captain Cole shouted. Prepare to break through their defenses. The fleet surged forward, their cloaks flickering as they raced to their targets. Missiles and energy beams from the surface of Lorien screamed toward them, but the human ships dodged and weaved through the incoming fire. Each ship was designed for one thing: survival. The Vanguard led the charge, its engines roaring as it barreled through the defensive fire, heading straight for the heart of the Council's citadel. Inside the Council's command center, chaos erupted. The sudden appearance of the human fleet, coupled with the devastating strikes against their leadership facilities, sent the Council into disarray. Zyther, the reptilian High Magistrate, stood at the center of the chaos, his cold eyes narrowing in fury. How did they find us? Zyther growled. Prepare the last line of defense. Humanity will not escape this time. But the damage had already been done. Garrick's forces had already made it to the surface, infiltrating the Council's heavily guarded citadel. The strike teams, made up of elite human and Alliance soldiers, raced through the halls, neutralizing the Council's commanders, severing the leadership from their power base. As the final blow was dealt, Garrick's voice crackled over the comms. This is President Garrick of the United Earth Government. The Council's leadership has been neutralized. Your reign is over. And across the galaxy, the message was broadcast loud and clear. The Galactic Council, once a powerful and unchallenged authority, was now in ruins. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's defiance, and the spark of rebellion had ignited in the hearts of countless species. But as Garrick and his forces stood victorious, they knew this was only the beginning. The Council's remnants would rally their forces. The fight for the future of the galaxy had only just begun. The fall of the Galactic Council's leadership was a historic moment, reverberating across the galaxy. The broadcast from President Garrick had spread like wildfire, reaching planets in the farthest corners of known space. The message was clear: humanity had toppled the mighty council. But with the old regime destroyed, chaos quickly began to spread. The galaxy was now a powder keg, and the question was no longer if the galaxy would fracture, but when. The Free Star Alliance, once a ragtag coalition of outliers and rebels, now found themselves in the unenviable position of trying to fill the vacuum left by the Council's collapse. In the aftermath of the attack on Lorien, the human fleet returned to their base of operations, a secure, remote outpost on the edge of human-controlled space. The Vanguard was docked for repairs, her crew exhausted but triumphant. Inside the war room, Garrick gathered with his senior officers and the leaders of the Free Star Alliance to discuss what came next. "We've done the impossible," Garrick said, his voice heavy with the weight of their victory. "But we've only struck the first blow. The Council's leadership is gone, but their influence still remains. Their fleets are scattered across the galaxy, and their factions are in disarray. We need to organize, and fast." Captain Cole, sitting across from him, nodded. "We've got a window of opportunity, sir. But the longer we wait, the more the Council's remnants will regroup. We have to strike while we still have momentum." "The Free Star Alliance will stand with humanity," said Varth, the leader of the Alliance's council, his rough voice deep and gravelly. His species, the Trian, were known for their strength and resilience, and they had become key allies to humanity's cause. "But we are not a unified force yet. Some of our people are still hesitant. They see the power vacuum and wonder if we can hold the line." Garrick leaned forward, his gaze intense. "We need to prove to them that we can. We need to take the fight to the remnants of the Council, show the galaxy that they're no longer the dominant force. But we can't do it alone. We need to rally the independent systems, the ones who've been oppressed for generations. We've been reaching out," Varth continued. "But it won't be easy. Many systems are afraid. They've seen what the Council can do when they're threatened. We'll have to prove we're more than just rebels. We need to be a symbol of hope. That's why we've got to strike fast," Garrick said. "If we can hit the Council's remaining strongholds and dismantle their fleets one by one, we'll send a message. If we wait too long, the remnants will unite and come after us with everything they have." Lieutenant Harris spoke up from the corner of the room. "There's something else we need to consider. The Council had secret programs, research facilities, weapons caches, and advanced technology hidden across the galaxy. Some of it is bound to fall into the wrong hands, and that could be just as dangerous as the Council itself." Garrick nodded grimly. "We need to secure those sites. I'll be assigning teams to track down and neutralize any remaining Council assets. We can't let them regroup." Just then, a young officer burst into the room, holding a datapad in his hands. "Sir, you need to see this." The officer handed the datapad to Garrick, who quickly scanned the report. His eyes narrowed. "Where is this?" he asked. "Ugara Station, sir. It's a former Council research facility. We've just received intel that there's something major being developed there. Something powerful." Garrick exchanged a glance with Captain Cole. "I want a team ready to move out. We'll hit Ugara Station first. If the Council has anything left to throw at us, that's where it'll be." The briefing room fell into a tense silence as everyone processed the weight of the mission ahead. Garrick could feel the gravity of the moment. The fight was far from over, and they had no way of knowing what they would find at Ugara Station. But if humanity was to lead the galaxy into a new age, they had to confront whatever threat remained, no matter how terrifying. Meanwhile, on Ugara Station. Deep within the outer rim, hidden from prying eyes, Ugara Station buzzed with activity. A team of high-ranking Council scientists, now working under the command of a rogue faction known as the Shadow Order, was on the brink of completing a dangerous new weapon. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of altering the very fabric of space and time. The Shadow Order was a remnant of the Council's darkest and most secretive programs, made up of scientists, military officers, and other operatives who had escaped the fall of the regime. Led by a mysterious figure known only as the Architect, they had dedicated themselves to continuing the Council's work, no matter the cost. The Architect, a shadowy figure whose true identity remained a closely guarded secret, stood in a dimly lit lab, watching as his scientists worked to complete the weapon. He could feel the power building, the energy that would soon be harnessed and unleashed. "This will change everything," the Architect muttered to himself. "The Council was weak, but with this, we can reshape the galaxy. We can make the galaxy fear us once again." Back on the Vanguard, ***. The mission to Ugara Station was now in motion. Garrick, Cole, Harris, and a team of elite soldiers prepared to board a strike shuttle, heading toward the research station. They knew they had no time to waste. If the Shadow Order was truly developing a weapon of mass destruction, they couldn't allow it to fall into their hands. As the shuttle's doors closed, Garrick turned to his crew, his voice steady. "We end this today. Whatever they're building on Ugara Station, we take it out. No mercy." With that, the shuttle blasted off, heading into the darkness of space toward their destination. The journey to Ugara Station was filled with tension, the hum of the shuttle's engines almost deafening in the otherwise quiet cabin. Garrick stood at the front, arms crossed, his face a mask of resolve. The stakes had never been higher. The Shadow Order, a dark remnant of the Galactic Council's power, was creating a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever seen. A weapon that could undo everything they had fought for. Beside him, Captain Cole was preparing her squad. Elite soldiers, equipped with the latest human and Alliance technology, checked their gear and silently went over the mission protocols. No one spoke much, there was little to say that hadn't already been said. They were going in blind, and time was against them. Ugara Station was far from a peaceful outpost, it had been turned into a heavily fortified research facility by the Shadow Order, with layers of defense that would make even the most seasoned warriors think twice. "This is it," Garrick said finally, breaking the silence. "We need to move fast and hit them hard. We can't afford to let them finish that weapon. We'll split into two teams, one will take the primary research lab, the other will secure the comms and disable any escape routes. We don't let them evacuate. We don't leave any stone unturned." Cole nodded. "Understood, sir. We'll hit them where it hurts." The shuttle began its descent toward Ugara Station, its engines roaring as it cut through the silence of deep space. As they neared, the station's massive form became visible in the distance, a sprawling network of interlocking platforms, observation decks, and industrial hangars. The station's defenses came to life as they approached, sending out a series of pulse blasts that crackled across the comms. "They know we're here," Harris said, his eyes glued to the readouts. "Shields at full power. We're going to be in for a fight." "Good," Garrick said, his voice cold. "We're here for a fight." Inside Ugara Station. The Shadow Order had anticipated the threat. The Architect, their enigmatic leader, stood before a massive holographic display in the heart of the station's control room, his fingers tracing the air as he manipulated the systems. The station's security grid had been activated, and automated turrets began to lock onto the incoming shuttle. The energy weapon was almost ready, its core was stabilized, and its power was now fully contained. It was time to strike. "Deploy the countermeasures," the Architect ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "We will not let them ruin our plans. The weapon will be completed. Humanity will not win this war." The security personnel, who had long since pledged loyalty to the Shadow Order, quickly moved into position. They were ready to defend the facility at all costs, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. In the heart of the station's underground labs, the weapon, known only as the Temporal Disruptor, was being prepared for activation. Its core was a swirling mass of energy, a fusion of alien technology and Council experimentation, designed to distort spacetime itself. It could tear apart entire star systems, warp reality, and render planets into nothing but fragments. If completed, it would make the Council's previous weapons look like toys in comparison. As the countdown on the weapons activation chamber began, one of the lead scientists, a former Council researcher named Dr. Vieira, looked over at her colleague, a grim expression on her face. "We've done the impossible," she said quietly. "But is it worth it? This weapon, it could tear the fabric of the galaxy apart." Her colleague, a hardened operative of the Shadow Order named Rax, simply nodded. "We've gone too far to stop now. This is the future of the galaxy. Humanity will either bend to us or be destroyed." But Dr. Vieira couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something far more dangerous than they realized. Meanwhile, aboard the shuttle. The shuttle cut through the station's outer defenses, blasting past pulse turrets and emergency defense grids. The hull of the ship shook with each hit, but the shields held strong. As they breached the outer docking bays, the shuttle made its final descent into Ugara Station's interior. "Brace for impact," Captain Cole shouted over the intercom. "We're hitting the station hard." With a deafening crash, the shuttle's landing gears slammed into the station's metal floor, and the doors hissed open. The strike team immediately poured out, weapons drawn, ready for anything. The halls of Ugara Station were eerily quiet, save for the hum of the energy fields powering the station systems. "Stay sharp," Garrick said as he led the way, his eyes scanning the dark corridors. The station's corridors were filled with shadows, and the echoes of their footsteps seemed unnaturally loud. "We move fast and hit hard. No prisoners." The first assault. The strike team's first engagement was swift. A handful of Shadow Order soldiers, armed with heavy plasma rifles, appeared around a corner. The exchange of gunfire was intense, but the human team was well prepared, using their superior agility and tactics to overwhelm the opposition. In minutes, the area was secured. "Clear," Cole reported as the last enemy soldier fell. Garrick nodded, but his expression was grim. "We've got a long way to go. Move out." They pushed forward, navigating through the twisting hallways of the station's lower levels. They knew they had to reach the weapons control room before it was too late. The countdown. Back in the station's core, the temporal disruptor's countdown was nearing its final stages. With each passing second, the weapon's energy levels surged higher, and the station systems began to tremble. 5 minutes to activation, one of the Shadow Order operatives said, a glint of fanaticism in his eyes. "Ready the detonation sequence. Humanity will fall." But as the final countdown ticked away, Garrick's strike team finally breached the core's outer defenses. "Team, this is it," Captain Cole shouted, leading the charge toward the control room. "Keep moving." They entered the chamber just as the temporal disruptor's countdown hit the 2-minute mark. The room was filled with a humming energy, and the device pulsed with a bright blue light, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The architect was there, his dark figure standing in front of the control panel, a smug smile playing at the corners of his lips. "It's over, Garrick," the architect said, his voice cold. "You've lost." Garrick's eyes locked onto the temporal disruptor's core, and his mind raced. They couldn't let the architect complete the activation. Not now. Not ever. The air was thick with tension in the heart of Ugara Station's control room. The temporal disruptor pulsed with an ominous blue glow, its energy core crackling with power. The countdown to activation was down to 1 minute, and the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. Garrick's team had made it this far, but they were still too late to stop the weapon from being fully armed. Across the room, the architect stood at the control panel, his cold eyes fixed on the humans who had dared to breach the sanctum. His face was hidden in shadow, but his voice was unwavering. "You don't understand, do you, President Garrick?" The architect's words dripped with disdain. "You think you can stop what's coming? The temporal disruptor will change everything. It will bend spacetime to our will, reshape the galaxy in our image. The Council was weak, but with this weapon, we will remake the universe." Garrick's eyes never left the architect. His hand gripped the hilt of his sidearm, his fingers itching for action. Behind him, Cole and Harris moved into position, weapons ready. This isn't about remaking the galaxy, Garrick said, his voice steady. It's about survival. Yours and everyone else's. We won't let you tear the galaxy apart. Not today. The architect chuckled darkly. You don't have a choice. The countdown is final. There's nothing you can do now. Garrick's mind raced. The weapon was a ticking bomb, and the clock was running out. His eyes flicked to the control panel, then to the pulsating energy core of the temporal disruptor. There had to be something, anything, that could stop this. But then, in a flash, a realization hit him. Captain, take your team to the panel. We need to override the system, shut it down manually. Garrick ordered, his voice sharp and urgent. Cole's squad moved immediately, splitting into 2 teams. Cole, Harris, and 2 others dashed toward the control panel, while Garrick and the remaining soldiers kept their weapons trained on the architect. Do you think you can just waltz in and disable the temporal disruptor? The architect sneered. It's beyond your understanding. The power it holds. You'll never be able to reverse it. You're right, Garrick replied, his voice low and firm. We don't understand it. But we understand one thing, we fight until the last second. As Cole and Harris reached the control panel, they immediately began working to breach the security systems. The station's alarms blared in response to the intrusion, but it was too late. Harris quickly pulled up the terminal's override codes, accessing the weapon's core functions. The disruptor is reading at full power. Harris called out. We've only got seconds. Focus. Cole barked. We need to shut it down, now. Garrick's gaze remained fixed on the architect, who was watching the team's every move with an almost sadistic curiosity. You truly believe you can stop this, the architect said, stepping forward. But you are nothing. You're a dying race, clinging to hope. The future doesn't belong to you. With that, the architect suddenly lunged toward the control panel, his hand reaching for an emergency lever that would initiate the weapon's activation sequence. No! Cole shouted, sprinting toward him. But the architect was fast. His hand gripped the lever, and with a swift pull, he began the final activation sequence. A deafening hum filled the room, the temporal disruptor's core glowing brighter with each passing moment. But before the weapon could fully power up, something unexpected happened. In a blur of motion, Garrick crossed the room. His arm shot out and slammed into the architect's side, knocking him off balance. The architect's hand missed the lever by a fraction of an inch, and the countdown froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. Garrick stood over the architect, his eyes cold with fury. You're done. It's over. The architect slowly rose, a cruel smile still tugging at the corners of his lips. You think you've won? You think you've defeated me? He straightened, his voice full of contempt. I am just one part of a much larger plan. The Shadow Order will rise again. You may have stopped the disruptor, but you haven't stopped the war. But Garrick wasn't listening. Instead, he turned his attention back to the temporal disruptor's core. In the last desperate moments, as the architect and his operatives scrambled to regain control, Garrick's hand moved to the manual shutdown lever. Activate manual override, Garrick said, his voice low. With a deep breath, he pulled the lever. The room seemed to hold its breath for a moment. The energy within the temporal disruptor flickered, then began to wane, the blinding light slowly dimming. A final surge of power sent a shockwave through the station, but the weapon powered down, its pulse fading to nothing. The architect's eyes widened in disbelief. "No," he screamed, rushing toward the control panel, but it was too late. Garrick turned and met his gaze. You're finished. The galaxy will never kneel to you. With the temporal disruptor deactivated, the rest of the Shadow Order forces were quickly subdued by Garrick's team. The remaining operatives were captured, and the architect, beaten and broken, was taken into custody. The aftermath. Back on the Vanguard, the team received confirmation that Agara Station was fully secured, and the temporal disruptor had been deactivated. the weapon that could have unraveled the very fabric of spacetime, was no longer a threat. But the victory was bittersweet. Garrick stood on the bridge, staring out into the vastness of space. The Shadow Order was defeated, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was still fractured, and remnants of the Council and rogue factions continued to pose a threat. But humanity had proven something that day: when faced with impossible odds, they would fight with everything they had. The future was uncertain, but humanity had earned its place among the stars. And the message was clear: the galaxy would no longer bow to any single power. The age of the Galactic Council had ended. The age of humanity had begun.